Hello and welcome back to the Homestand Show. Hey Justin, did you hear the news? It's just been breaking. Leafs are playing the Lightning.
No way.
I know.
4 months that I finally got the answer.
I know. Finally, eh? We
Finally.
were just, we weren't quite sure who it. Oh my God! Thanks NHL. Yesterday we kind of whined about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of boring that we've been, prepared for this for the last 4 months, but still we're getting closer and closer now to doomsday for all Leafs fans.
I
Let's
like
call it
that.
that, shall we? Doomsday? Yeah, I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Well, let's find out from an expert, shall we?
Absolutely.
Erik Erlendsson is of lightninginsider.com. All right, Erik. Leaf Nation is terrified. Okay, you know the history about this team. You know what's happened in recent years. We just can't get out of that first round. Tampa last year came closer, but in the end, of course, Tampa was a superior team, much better goaltending. So that's how Leaf Nation feels about the Lightning. How does Lightning Nation feel about the Leafs?
Oh, about the Leafs, I threw me with a curveball there. I thought we were going to talk about how the Lightning felt about the Lightning. I mean, look, there's certainly the butt of jokes, right? There'll certainly be some memes that are out there. Or I've already seen a few involving Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, about Leafs fans and Lightning fans after the series. So it'll be kind of interesting. But I think at the end of the day, there's respect, right? Because I think people understand and realize how good this Leafs team is. Like the Lightning a few years ago, you don't get to prove that and show how good you are until you get to the playoffs, until you win in the playoffs. But with the core that they have with Marner and Matthews and Nylander and Tavares, and you add in Ryan O'Reilly, who they brought in to kind of add some of that playoff grit and depth that they've probably been lacking. I think there's a lot of respect there. I think there's question marks in goal. With a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference outside of maybe the Lightning and the Rangers about how goaltending can perform in the postseason. And I think the Lightning fans understand what kind of a team they're up against with the Leafs. It's just a question if it's because in this series, honestly, guys, yeah, it's Leafs versus Lightning, but it's also Leafs versus their own history.
Yeah, the mental aspect of it. And I think for me, the biggest thing was last year in that Game 7 in Toronto. I think the Leafs were a better team than Tampa Bay, but Tampa Bay had that winner's mentality. And I say they shut that water off for the Leafs in the third period. And they basically, that's how they killed the Maple Leafs, right? But I want to talk on Tampa Bay side of it. Fatigue. This is a team that's played a whole lot of hockey over the last couple of years. Is that going to be a determining factor for this team's success? Or do you think John Cooper will have this team ready and prime come game one?
I think fatigue only factors in if they lose, right? If they win, we won't talk about fatigue. If they lose, then say, yeah, they're a tired team. So it just depends on, which kind of narrative wants to be pushed. But I mean, I think it's a concern for sure. You look at the number of games that, like even a guy like Pat Maroon, Pat Maroon's been to 4 straight Stanley Cup finals. Even Corey Perry's been to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals himself. So you've even got some players who haven't been with this team the whole time that have played a ton of hockey when you add in the postseason numbers to it all. So I think it's something that they're conscious of. They just finished a stretch of 19 games in 33 days, and they look tired. There's no doubt they look tired towards the end of that stretch, and their record was actually under 500 in those 17 games. I think they were 8-9-2 or 8-9-2 in those 19 games. So I think it's a concern. I think the biggest concern is with Andrei Vasilevskiy because, it's the number of games, but it's the high intensity level games as well, which takes a certain mental focus, especially for a goaltender. So I think it's something we'll talk about during the series and we'll see how things kind of play out during the series. But I think like this team, they're not an aging team, right? Yeah, they're older than they were for sure, but Steven Stamkos is 33, Victor Hedman's 32, Nikita Kucherov is 29, Braden Point is 27, right? So there's still some, even with the amount of hockey that they play, they're still relatively young speaking about how they've been able to handle this. And, let's face it too, professional athletes these days are so they're almost too in shape, right? In a lot of aspects. So I don't think fatigue is physically is anything that's going to be a concern. If anything, it's the mental grind and the focus, the level that you have to get yourself up to might be the area where if they dip, it might be there.
You mentioned Vasilevskiy, and it is interesting. And a lot of Leaf fans are kind of really hoping that, that decline of sorts in the regular season is something more than perhaps it looks on the surface. But the bottom line is This guy hits a switch, doesn't he, when the playoffs begin? Is there really that much concern around his current play within the team?
No, not really. Like a lot of the players during that 33-day stretch, there were some goals that went through Andre Vasilevsky that we are not used to seeing go through him. So that's where you start to think, oh, Jesus, is maybe he tired? But the last 4 games, he's let in 3 goals. He's got 2 shutouts. He stopped 38 shots against the Islanders. As long as the team in front of him protects the middle areas of the ice and doesn't give up the ton of grade A scoring chances like they had the past month or so, then there's a good chance Andre Vasilevsky is going to stop most of the pucks that he sees. That's just who he is, and he's going to have a couple during a game. You're going to go, wow, what a save by Andre Vasilevsky. So I think with his current little run here, he's got 2 shutouts in 3 games heading into the game against the Rangers. I think that's more of who we're going to see once we get to the postseason, because let's face it, he is so locked in. I mean, he's got those crazy eyes that he kind of puts out there. If you've seen the close-ups of him with the underneath the mask, he's just, when it comes crunch time, his focus is beyond any goaltender that I've covered in my 20 plus years with this franchise.
We've talked about Vasilevsky, and how could you not? He's probably the best money goalie of this generation. Of course, Steven Stamkos, Victor Hedman, again, one of all elite players. Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point is quietly going to have a 50-goal season, I think. But I want to talk about Brandon Hagel. 27 goals this year, a guy that kind of falls under the radar to a lot of the casual fans. Just to explain the impact that Brandon Hagel has on this Tampa Bay lineup.
He's an energizer bunny. He just has endless energy. It's really been fun to watch him grow this year. When they acquired him from Chicago ahead of the trade deadline last year, the conventional thought was, when and if Andre Palat leaves, this is a guy that they feel can replace Andre Palat's production on a top line and fill that top line role. And, you just watch him forecheck. He's one of the league leaders in takeaways as well. So he's got some really good defensive acumen to his game that comes along with it. But he's just a relentless forechecker. He has no fear. He's not a big guy. He's 5'10", 5'11", probably 185 pounds. So he's not a big player by any stretch, but he's always around the net. He's always deep in on the forecheck. He's on the penalty kill. He's a threat to score shorthanded as well. And when they lost some of the players that the salary cap forces you to lose, like an Andre Palat, they bring in a Hagel who's making $1.5 million to get this out of production out of him. He's under contract for 1 more year as well. He's had a huge impact. And the thing with him, last year in the playoffs, they asked him to kind of play more of a defensive role. He was on a line a lot with Anthony Cirelli and Alex Killorn as sort of the shutdown line. This year, he's played a lot of top line, but now we're kind of getting to see if he can play more of a defensive mindset as well. He's been playing a lot with Nick Paul and Ross Colton here of late, but you always have that offense that he can bring. And he's just really a good 2-way forward that can provide a lot of energy and a lot of offensive chances with the forechecking that he can put, deep in the other team's end.
It does seem that Tampa always find these diamonds in the rough, right? And their bottom 6 is always so strong. The deadline in the East was fascinating. The Leafs really, got more sandpaper, more tenacity. Where would you put Tampa this time around compared to this time last year? Obviously, you mentioned they lost some players. They brought players in at the deadline as well. Are they better than this time last year, or pretty much the same, or less?
They're not better. I don't think their forward depth is as good as it was last year. I mean, Ross Colton was a 20-goal scorer last year. I think he's at 16 this year. Nick Paul was off to a great start. He's at 17 goals. He hasn't scored, I think, in 33 or 34 games. He's got 1 goal, I think, in his last 34 games played. They haven't gotten the fourth line production from Pat Maroon. Corey Perry was a 19-goal scorer last year. He's just past the 10-digit mark. So I don't think they're as deep forward-wise, but the area where they're just not anywhere near as deep is on defense. I mean, you lose Ryan McDonough, you're not going to be able to replace him. He's so valuable in everything he can do in all situations when he's on the ice. And Mikhail Sergachev has stepped up his game this year, but they don't have the depth. Last year they could have Hedman and McDonough on the ice pretty much most of the game if they wanted to. And then they would take Sergachev and play him on the right side with Hedman on occasion as well. And then that they kind of added to it late in games, especially. They don't have that luxury this year. They're going to probably have 2 rookies on the back end with Nick Perbix, who came in as, had 4 years at St. Cloud State in the NCAAs in his first year. He's been really good, very steady. He's very Anton Strawman-like in his game, but at the end of the day, he's never played a playoff game in the NHL. He's played big games in college, and he was with the U.S. Olympic team last year as well. And then Darren Radish looks like he's going to get the opportunity to start as well. A little bit older, 27 years old, was having a great year in the American Hockey League. He was a point of game player for the Syracuse Crunch, but he's come up and he's looked more and more solid. But, you don't lose Jan Ruda and Ryan McDonough and think that you're going to have the same defensive depth. It's definitely different on the back end for this team. So as a whole, I'd say they're probably a little bit below where they were last year, but they've been on such a high level. That's a pretty high bar. So even dropping below that bar, they're still a really good team.
Erik, Leaf fans will be very, very happy to hear that. We'll see what happens in the next month or so. Thanks so much. Just really enjoyed it. We'll do it again sometime soon.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Be well.
Cheers. That's Erik Erlendsson. Okay, so Tampa. I mean, when you hear Erik talk there, they're still a very, very strong team.
Not where they
were, but not where they were. Yeah, whereas the Leafs, in many people's books, are deeper now than they were a year ago. As a guy that is very much objective,
yes,
when viewing the Leafs, unlike myself, who may be somewhat blinkered. Where are you at with this series right now?
Toronto Maple Leafs are a better team than the Tampa Bay Lightning. From top to bottom, roster for roster, the Toronto Maple Leafs are a better team. But, and this is the biggest but, the Tampa Bay Lightning have a massive goaltending advantage, and they have a massive experience and mentality advantage. And I think that right there, a guy like John Cooper, who can really play the media and play the undercard role, even if they're not the underdog, he does that and he gets his team ready to play.
And Victor Hedman can play the entire game.
He can play
by
60
himself.
minutes, exactly.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. Coming up very, very soon. The Heartbreak is around the corner. All right, so when we come back, Albert's going to join us from Montreal with a Canadian icon.